and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to declare open the 10th Review Conference of the Parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The Review Conference has been convened pursuant to Article 8, Paragraph 3 of the Treaty and Resolution 70/28 of 11 December 2015 of the United Nations General Assembly. This is the 10th Review Conference of the Treaty and the 5th to be held since May 1995, when states parties adopted decisions on the indefinite extension of the treaty, on the strengthening of its review process, and on principles and objectives for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, together with a resolution on the Middle East. The treaty, which entered into force 52 years ago, has played a crucial role in nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Throughout the past half-century, the NPT has served as an essential pillar of international peace and security and a bulwark against the dangers of nuclear weapons. This review conference provides all parties of the treaty with an important opportunity to reaffirm their commitment to the treaty and to the full implementation of all its provisions, as well as the consensus outcomes of previous review conferences. This is important in upholding the integrity of the treaty and in ensuring that it remains the cornerstone of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime and an essential foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament. The conference also provides an opportunity, as decided by the 1995 Review and Extension Conference, to address emerging challenges and to articulate a way forward to ensure that the treaty stays relevant and fit for purpose. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, following the practice of previous review conferences, I now wish to introduce the final report of the Preparatory Committee, NPT/Conf.2020/1, adopted on 20th May 2019. The committee held 3 sessions during the period of May 2017 to May 2019. 153 states parties to the treaty participated in the work of one or more of the sessions of the Preparatory Committee. States not party to the treaty, specialized agencies, and international and regional intergovernmental organizations, as well as representatives of academia and non-governmental organizations have attended meetings of the Preparatory Committee in accordance with the modalities of participation agreed by the committee. At each session of the Preparatory Committee, a meeting was specifically allocated for representatives of non-governmental organizations to share their views and perspectives on relevant issues. The Preparatory Committee was able to agree and make a recommendation on all main issues related to the organization of the conference. In particular, during the second session of the Preparatory Committee on 25th April 2018, a decision on the date and venue for the conference was adopted. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic forced the postponement of the review conference on 4 occasions. On each occasion, a decision was taken by state parties through silence procedure. In his letter dated 11 March 2022, the President-designate Ambassador Gustavo Slavinen informed states parties that the dates of the 10th Review Conference had been confirmed from 1st to 26 August 2022. The Preparatory Committee was also able to agree and make recommendations on the draft rules of procedure and the financial arrangements, the provisional agenda, and the allocation of items to the main committees, as well as background documentation. The recommendations on these issues are reflected in the final report of the committee, which is available on the UNODA's website for the 10th NPT Review Conference. The preparatory committee decided to defer consideration on a final document or documents to the review conference. Throughout the preparatory process, the committee devoted most of its meetings to substantive discussions on all aspects of the treaty based on the allocation of items to each of the main committees of the 2015 review conference and 3 specific blocks of issues. 1. Nuclear disarmament and security assurances. 2. Regional issues, including with respect to the Middle East and the implementation of the 1995 resolution on the Middle East. And 3. Peaceful uses of nuclear energy and other provisions of the treaty, and improving the effectiveness of the strengthened review process. Guided by the provisions of the final document of the 2000 Review Conference, including paragraph 7 of the section, despite the committee's best efforts, it was unable to produce a consensus report containing substantive recommendations to the Review Conference. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, it is my privilege and duty to take up a particular issue, namely the recommendation for the office of the President of the 10th NPT Review Conference. As agreed at the 3rd session of the Preparatory Committee, upon receipt of the nomination from the chair of the group of non-aligned states parties to the treaty, I communicated the candidacy of His Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Slavinen of Argentina to all states parties on 23rd January 2020. Ambassador Slavinen's candidacy was unanimously endorsed for the presidency of the 10th NPT Review Conference. I now place the recommendation formally before the conference for approval. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect His Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Slavinen by acclamation as President of the 10th Review Conference of the Parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. It is so decided. I wish to express my heartiest congratulations to His Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Slavinen and to assure him of my full support and cooperation, and I am sure of all delegations throughout the conference. I would now like to invite the President to take his seat. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Slavinen to the podium.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Folder. Please. Su Excelencia, señor Antonio Guterres, Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas, Su Excelencia, señor Rafael Grossi, Director General del Organismo Internacional de Energía Atómica, distinguidos primeros ministros, excelencias, distinguidos delegados, damas y caballeros. Es un verdadero honor para mí poder dirigirme a ustedes hoy, ya como presidente de la 10ª conferencia del examen del Tratado sobre la No Proliferación de las Armas Nucleares. Quisiera, en primer lugar, agradecer a mi país y al GRULAC por haber apoyado mi candidatura y al movimiento de países no alineados por endosarla. Mi agradecimiento es también para todos los Estados parte por la confianza depositada en mí al elegirme para el cargo que asumo con mi mayor responsabilidad. Esa confianza ha sido inquebrantable desde marzo de 2020. Cuando esta conferencia tuvo que ser pospuesta por primera vez. Estoy sumamente agradecido por el apoyo y la flexibilidad que los Estados partes han demostrado a lo largo de este tiempo. Un país como la Argentina, con una larga experiencia y excelentes credenciales en materia de no proliferación y usos pacíficos de la energía nuclear, así como con un firme compromiso con el desarme nuclear y con el objetivo último de lograr un mundo libre de armas nucleares. Comencé este viaje creyendo que sería uno de los presidentes de las conferencias de examen del PNP con menos tiempo en el cargo. Hoy no queda ninguna duda que terminé siendo el presidente designado con mayor duración. Este día ha tardado en llegar. Estoy seguro de que hubo quienes incluso pensaron que nunca llegaría. Pero después de más de 2 años, finalmente estamos aquí, en la línea de partida, la apertura de la 10ª conferencia de examen. La larga pausa no ha sido fácil. Expreso mis más profundas condolencias a quienes han perdido a sus seres queridos durante la terrible pandemia del COVID-19. Si hemos aprendido una lección de esta pandemia, es que eventos aparentemente de baja probabilidad pueden y ocurren con poca o ninguna advertencia, pero con consecuencias catastróficas que afectan al mundo. Y lo mismo ocurre con las armas nucleares. Como causa de la pandemia, esta conferencia fue pospuesta, como he dicho antes, en 4 ocasiones. Sin embargo, los Estados parte han sido persistentes en asegurar que la misma se lleve a cabo. Ello demuestra el reconocido estatus del tratado como el foro preeminente de negociación multilateral, en lo que se refiere a las armas nucleares y a su papel como pilar de la paz y la seguridad internacionales y la promoción de los usos pacíficos de la energía nuclear. Durante estos 2 largos años, los Estados parte han demostrado una acción permanente. Han realizado un número récord de consultas informales, tanto virtuales como presenciales, y también han participado en una gran cantidad de eventos virtuales organizados por las Naciones Unidas, el OIEA, grupos interregionales de Estados partes, grupos de expertos, universidades y la sociedad civil. Por eso, destaco y agradezco su predisposición y flexibilidad durante este tiempo. Ello nos ha permitido mantener la atención sobre los temas de sustancia de este instrumento tan esencial. Como resultado de este arduo trabajo, ahora estamos, creo yo, en una buena posición para poner manos a la obra. Pero no nos equivoquemos. El verdadero trabajo comienza ahora, hoy, en esta prestigiosa sala del multilateralismo. Tenemos 4 semanas para lograr nuestro objetivo, un resultado de consenso que fortalezca la implementación de los 3 pilares del tratado: el desarme nuclear, la no proliferación y los usos pacíficos de la energía nuclear. Como siempre he dicho, El equilibrio en la implementación de estos tres pilares es clave, es fundamental, ya que se refuerzan mutuamente. Este es el gran acuerdo, the grand bargain, que se encuentra en la esencia misma del tratado. Ahora, debemos ser honestos con nosotros mismos y reconocer que el mundo ha cambiado mucho desde la última conferencia de examen y en algunos aspectos, lamentablemente, de manera radical. Los Estados partes, ustedes, tendrán que negociar en un entorno internacional mucho más complejo y cambiante. Uno en el que las presiones externas relacionadas, entre otras cosas, con el abrupto cambio del entorno global de seguridad como consecuencia de la guerra en Ucrania, están impactando en la sustancia del trabajo e impactará seguramente en nuestro trabajo. Por ello, en lo que hace a las prioridades en relación con el cumplimiento del tratado, asegurar una implementación efectiva de las obligaciones y los compromisos centrales resulta esencial para preservar el proceso de revisión. No podemos dejar de destacar que, para muchos, esto es particularmente relevante en relación con los compromisos en materia de desarme nuclear. Las tendencias negativas que socavan la credibilidad de lograr avances sustantivos en esta materia reflejan que la amenaza que representan las armas nucleares no ha disminuido desde su primer uso en 1945 y han regresado a niveles similares a los de la Guerra Fría, lamentablemente. Tampoco podemos negar que enfrentamos desafíos en materia de no proliferación. En estos temas se observa un amplio acuerdo sobre la necesidad de fortalecer el régimen de no proliferación, con particular énfasis en las perspectivas regionales. De igual manera, es necesario destacar el marco que brinda el TNP en el acceso a los usos y aplicaciones pacíficas de la energía nuclear y, por ende, de los beneficios que traen aparejados para nuestras sociedades, en particular en el logro de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Desde el comienzo de mi mandato como presidente designado, he dejado en claro que los temas de sustancia del tratado son prerrogativa exclusiva de los Estados partes. Mi papel es facilitar sus esfuerzos y ayudarlos en sus negociaciones hacia un resultado significativo, a meaningful result, un resultado que, cualquiera fuese su formato, reitere la importancia, la credibilidad y la vitalidad del TNP. Por ello, no estaría cumpliendo con mi deber si no utilizase esta oportunidad para subrayar la responsabilidad histórica que recae sobre todos los Estados partes en el logro de este objetivo. A lo largo de sus ya 52 años, el TNP ha logrado enfrentar otros desafíos y contextos adversos en el pasado y confío en que también lo podrá lograr en esta conferencia. Por eso, espero que los Estados partes lleven adelante esta conferencia con sentido común y sobre la base de un propósito compartido. Necesitaremos también civismo en el discurso, diálogo franco y, por sobre todo, voluntad política para negociar genuinamente. Avanzar desde este enfoque resulta crucial, dada la importancia y la sensibilidad de las cuestiones que debemos abordar. Al fin y al cabo, se tratan de aspectos centrales y decisivos para la paz y seguridad internacional. Para finalizar, quiero reiterar que encontrarán en mí un presidente transparente y accesible y que hará todo lo posible para ayudarlos a lograr nuestros objetivos compartidos. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to address the conference.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Slovinen, congratulations on your election as President of the conference. You have my full support in the task ahead of us. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this conference has been long delayed, but its importance and urgency remain undiminished. It takes place at a critical juncture for our collective peace and security. The climate crisis, stark inequalities, conflicts and human rights violations, and the personal and economic devastation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic have put our world under greater stress than it has faced in our lifetimes. And it occurs at a time of nuclear danger not seen since the height of the Cold War. That is the reason that, to undermine the importance of this conference, I will be in a few days in Hiroshima in the anniversary of the first nuclear bombardment in human history, and then I will follow it to two visits to other countries in the region, having non-proliferation as a key item in the agenda of the visits. Now, the initial post-Cold War period ushered in a tentative new hope for peace. A hope found in massive arsenal reductions, in entire regions declaring themselves to be nuclear weapons-free, and in the entrenchment of norms against the use, proliferation, and testing of nuclear weapons. When I was Prime Minister of Portugal, I instructed our mission to the United Nations to vote for the first time against the resumption of nuclear testing in the Pacific. Before, the tradition of my country was to abstain, as if this was a matter in which we can abstain. And though a combination of commitment, judgment, and luck, the world avoided the suicidal mistake of nuclear conflict. But as the years have passed, these fruits of hope are withering. Humanity is in danger of forgetting the lessons forged in the terrifying fires of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Geopolitical tensions are reaching new highs. Competition is trumping cooperation and collaboration. Distrust has replaced dialogue, and disunity has replaced disarmament. States are seeking false security in stockpiling and spending hundreds of billions of dollars on doomsday weapons that have no place on our planet. Almost 13,000 nuclear weapons are now being held in arsenals around the world. All these at a time when the risks of proliferation are growing and guardrails to prevent escalation are weakening. And when crises with nuclear undertones are festering. From the Middle East and the Korean Peninsula to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and to many other factors around the world. Excellencies, the clouds that parted following the end of the Cold War are gathering once more. We have been extraordinarily lucky so far, but luck is not a strategy, nor is it a shield from geopolitical tensions boiling over into nuclear conflict. Today, humanity is just one misunderstanding, one miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation. We need the treaty of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons as much as ever. And that is why this review conference is so important. It's an opportunity to hammer out the measures that will help avoid certain disaster, and to put humanity on a new path towards a world free of nuclear weapons. It is also a chance to strengthen this treaty and make it fit for the warring world around us. I suggest 5 areas for action. First, we urgently need to reinforce and reaffirm the 77-year-old norm against the use of nuclear weapons. This requires a steadfast commitment from all states parties. It means finding practical measures that will reduce the risk of nuclear war and put us back on the path to disarmament. We need to strengthen all avenues of dialogue and transparency. And peace cannot take hold in an absence of trust and mutual respect. Second, reduction the risk of war is not enough. Eliminating nuclear weapons is the only guarantee they will never be used. We must work relentlessly towards this goal. And this must start with new commitments to shrink the numbers of all kinds of nuclear weapons so that they no longer hang by a thread over humanity. And it means reinvigorating and fully resourcing our multilateral agreements and frameworks around disarmament and non-proliferation, including the important work of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Troisièmement, nous devons nous attaquer aux tensions qui couvent au Moyen-Orient et en Asie. La persistance des conflits, conjuguée à la menace des armes nucléaires, rapproche ces régions de la catastrophe. Nous devons redoubler nos efforts en faveur du dialogue et de la négociation pour apaiser les tensions et tisser de nouveaux liens de confiance dans les régions qui en ont connu trop peu. Quatrièmement, nous devons promouvoir l'usage pacifique des technologies nucléaires, notamment à des fins médicales et autres, pour accélérer la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable. Utilisé à des fins pacifiques, le nucléaire peut être très bénéfique pour l'humanité. Cinquièmement et enfin, nous devons remplir tous les engagements restant pris dans le traité et veiller à ce que le texte demeure à jour et adapté à ces temps difficiles. Si nous sommes tous réunis ici aujourd'hui, c'est parce que nous avons foi dans l'objet et le but du traité. Mais si l'on veut assurer la pérennité du texte dans l'avenir, il faut dépasser le status quo. Il faut un engagement renouvelé ainsi que des négociations véritables et de bonne foi. Et il faut que toutes les parties soient à l'écoute, consentent à des compromis et gardent en permanence à l'esprit les enseignements du passé, mais aussi la fragilité de l'avenir. Excellences, les générations futures comptent sur votre engagement pour nous écarter de l'abîme. Il nous incombe à tous de laisser le monde dans un meilleur état, plus sûr que celui dans lequel nous l'avons trouvé. L'heure est venue de relever ce défi fondamental et de conjurer une fois pour toutes le spectre de l'anéantissement nucléaire. Je vous remercie.
On behalf of all delegations, I wish to thank the United Nations Secretary General for his important address and for his good wishes for the success of the conference. I'm also grateful for the kind words he has addressed to me. I would also like, on behalf of all state parties, to convey to him the sincere appreciation for the most valuable assistance that we have received throughout the preparatory process for the conference. I thank you. It gives me great pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, to address the conference.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, it's a great honor to be here today. And of course, it gives me a special and very meaningful feeling to be doing this under your leadership, Mr. President, a friend of more than 35 years in the Argentine diplomatic service. Mucha suerte, Gustavo. Estamos con vos. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the President, you heard it from the Secretary General. We are facing big challenges. And my job here today as the head of the international organization where the NPT comes to life through its safeguards system, through its technical cooperation program, would be to try to address the specific ways in which many of the things and the challenges that the Secretary General enunciated just now are being addressed. It is true we are at the moment where a number of important challenges and crises are converging in a quite astonishing way. We talk about a food crisis, we talk about an energy crisis, we talk about a climate crisis. And in every one of these, nuclear sciences, technologies, and applications have something to do, to contribute in our common efforts to face them and to bring well-being for all. When we talk about a climate crisis, of course, countries are looking into ways to address this red code for the planet, as rightly said by the International Panel on Climate Change. So it comes as no surprise that many countries continue in their peaceful use of nuclear energy to power their economies and to bring development when it's needed. This is happening in Asia, where countries are leading in the capacity in terms of nuclear energy. This is happening also in Europe, where many countries continue and increase the percentage of nuclear energy, and even when countries had decided on a phase-out, are thinking it over, slowing it down. Because what we need is every possible tool to face the incredible challenge of climate change and to decarbonize our economies. And of course, this is connected in a very clear way to the work that you are undertaking today, which is to review and to strengthen the instrument that provides the basis whereby this is happening every day. Of course, when it comes to energy, and nuclear energy in particular, everything finishes and starts with nuclear safety and nuclear security. And here, the nuclear safety regime, led by member states and in close cooperation with the IAEA, has been tested by fire and flood, has been tested by fire in the flames that engulfed the reactor number 4 in Chernobyl, and it was challenged by flood with a gigantic wave that crippled the safety systems of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Since then, nuclear safety has been reinforced, and nuclear is as safe as ever in a joint work by member states and nuclear technologists all over the world. But the technological challenges or the human and other problems that we have are being multiplied by the specter of war that was mentioned as well. And this has brought a new and unexpected dimension to nuclear safety in Ukraine, of course. At the beginning of the conflict, at the beginning of the war, I enunciated 7 pillars of nuclear safety that should never be violated when it comes to nuclear facilities. And these include, of course, the respect of the physical integrity of a nuclear power plant. This, of course, includes the necessity to preserve the safety and security system of a nuclear power plant. This includes, of course, the protection of the staff and their ability to carry out their job without undue pressure. This includes the permanent flow of external power to cool the systems. This includes the nuclear supply of components that have to come to these facilities and go out from these facilities. This, of course, includes radiation monitoring that must be present at all times. And finally, this must include communication with the regulators and others. All these 7 principles, ladies and gentlemen, all these 7 principles have been trampled upon or violated since this tragic episode started. This allowed us to go to Chernobyl as the IAEA and work together with Ukraine and restore the systems there. But still, there is an open challenge in Zaporizhia. For a long time, I've been trying to go there myself, leading a mission to carry out the indispensable safeguards inspections, because there is a lot of material there, to carry out the safety and security evaluations that need to be taking place there, to look after the situation of the staff of this nuclear power plant. At the beginning of this, the Board of Governors of the IAEA addressed in a resolution referring to the Russian aggression and the consequences of this in the work of the IAEA. Through this resolution, it addressed this issue, and you may be familiar with that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to go. We hope to be able to come to Zaporizhia, because if something happens there, we will only have ourselves to blame for it, not a catastrophe, not an earthquake or a tsunami. It will be our own inaction to blame for it. Nuclear non-proliferation has been rightly mentioned by the President and by the Secretary General. We do know that we have important challenges ahead of us. The safety and security and the safeguards systems that we have are essential. And as nuclear continues and as more nuclear material is added, a strong, robust, agile, present system of safeguards must be present everywhere. Let's not forget that in the 1990s, this system was circumvented, was challenged under the guise of peaceful activities. And this is when the international community came together and strengthened the safeguards regime that had been violated through the addition of the additional protocol, which reinforced that system so that no one can do that. We will be needing this kind of support to be carrying out our mission in the way it should be done. Of course, there are concrete issues that need to be addressed. We are working on them. We know that for us to be able to give the necessary and credible assurances that every activity in the Islamic Republic of Iran is in peaceful uses, we need to work collaborative with them. It can be done. We have been doing it in the past. But we need, and I say this very clearly, we need to have the access that is commensurate with the breadth and depth of that nuclear program. It can be done. Let's do it. There are, of course, other issues that are important for us. The situation in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is also of concern, and we hope that the inspectors of the IAEA will be able to return to this country from which they were expelled in 2009. Without that, there will be no trust and there will be no confidence. Let's do it. We also know, because everything evolves, as the President was saying, it's a different world. And we also know that countries are working on nuclear naval propulsion. This, which is foreseen in the existing regulatory framework, still raises questions and requires adequate technical answers so that anything that is being done will be in full compliance with all existing safeguards commitments, but all involved. The IAEA is seized with the matter, and we will be working on that. Finally, it is obvious that there is no, and we are not going to have a more secure world if more nuclear weapons are added to the existing nuclear arsenals, or if new countries are acceding to nuclear weapons. And we have to do everything in our power to prevent it. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, this is not a treaty for 20. This is a treaty from 194, or as many, universal. And this goes to the heart of the issues of the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Nuclear technologies, as the Secretary General was reminding us, help us cure cancer. Hence, the launch of our Race of Hope project, which I had the honor to launch in Addis Ababa, with our African friends, because in Africa, 70% of the population do not have access to radiotherapy, and people die of cancers. No one does in industrialized nations. This is an obscenity and must stop. And the IAEA can work with member states to do it. The same applies to food security, where we can work on drought-resistant crops and protect them for the economy and the well-being of these countries, or the protection against ocean acidification of plastic pollution. Every single aspect of this is comprised within the technical cooperation program of the IAEA. And this brings back to the main issue. Why are we here? We are here to review the treaty that underpins, makes sense of all of these activities that have to do with disarmament, with non-proliferation, and of course, with peaceful uses. So, from the perspective of the IAEA, where the NPT comes to life, let's recommit to these principles enshrined in this treaty. Let's protect the NPT. Let's embrace the NPT. The IAEA will be with you every step of the way. Thank you very much.
I thank the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency for his important address, and to express to him the appreciation of the state parties for the work being carried out by the agency regarding the implementation of the relevant provisions of the treaty and in preparation for this conference. I also want to thank my dear friend Rafael Mariano Grossi for the kind words addressed to me. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, due to his heavy work schedule, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres will regrettably now have to leave the Assembly Hall to attend to other business. I take this opportunity to wish you, Mr. Secretary General, all the best in your endeavors. And I thank you for your presence.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Best of luck.
Is she coming?
Is she coming soon? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Shall we wait? Go ahead. As you recalled, at its third session, the Preparatory Committee considered the draft rules of procedure for the conference and agreed to recommend them to the conference. The draft rules of procedures are contained in Annex 3 of the final report of the Preparatory Committee, document MPT/Conf 2020/1, which was submitted earlier to the conference by the chair of the third session of the Preparatory Committee, Ambassador Saeed Mohammed Ashrin Sayed Hussein. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the draft rules of procedures? It is so decided. Following the adoption of the rules of procedures, I would now like to refer to Rule 44/3 regarding requests for observer status for specialized agencies and international and regional and intergovernmental organizations. Requests for observer status have been received from the African Commission on Nuclear Energy, the African Union, the Agency for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, OPANAL, the Brazilian Argentine Agency for Accounting and Control of Nuclear Materials, ABAC, the European Union, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the League of Arab States, the Nuclear Energy Agency of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, the Pacific Islands Forum, the Preparatory Commission for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, CTBTO, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR, and United Nations University. I wish to recall that the Preparatory Committee agreed to recommend to the conference that, notwithstanding Rule 44, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of Procedures, specialized agencies and international and regional intergovernmental organizations be invited to make oral representations to the conference upon the decision of the conference on a case-by-case basis. May I take it that the conference wishes to proceed in accordance with the recommendations of its preparatory committee? It is so decided. With reference to Rule 44-4 of the Rules of Procedures, requests to attend meetings of the plenary or the main committees have been received from 160 non-governmental organizations. The list of these organizations has been made available to delegations in document MPT/conf2020/INF.4/Rev2. As state parties are aware, the Preparatory Committee, as reflected in paragraph 24 of document MPT/conf2020/1, agreed to recommend to the conference that, in accordance with the rules of procedures, representatives of non-governmental organizations be allowed to attend meetings other than those designated as closed and to receive documents of the conference. That, in accordance with past practice, non-governmental organizations be allowed to make written material available at their own expense to the participants of the conference, and that non-governmental organizations be allowed to address the conference consistent with the final document of the 2000 Review Conference. May I take it that the conference wishes to proceed in accordance with the recommendations of its preparatory committee? It is so decided. I would like now to proceed to the election of chairs and vice chairs of the three main committees, the Drafting Committee and the Credentials Committee. You will recall that at its third session, the Preparatory Committee agreed to recommend that main committees should be chaired by the chairs of the consecutive sessions of the Preparatory Committee or their successors as follows. Main Committee 1 should be chaired by a representative of the group of non-aligned state parties to the treaty, namely the chair of the third session of the Preparatory Committee. Main Committee 2 should be chaired by a representative of the group of Eastern European states, namely the chair of the second session of the Preparatory Committee. And Main Committee 3 should be chaired by a representative of the Western group, namely the chair of the first session of the Preparatory Committee. Accordingly, I have been informed of the following candidates for the posts of chairs for the main committees. For Main Committee 1, His Excellency Mr. Said Mohammed Hashrin Said Hussein of Malaysia. For Main Committee 2, His Excellency Mrs. Dominika Kroes of Poland. For Main Committee 3, His Excellency Mrs. Ingeborg Denissen of the Netherlands. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect Ambassador Said Mohammad Ashrin Said Hussein, Ambassador Dominica Croix, and Ambassador Ingeborg Dennison by acclamation? Thank you. Thank you. It is so decided. The committee also agreed to recommend that the post of chair of the drafting committee should be assumed by a representative of the group of Eastern European states, and the post of chair of the credentials committee by a representative of the group of non-aligned and other states. Have been informed that the following candidates for the posts of chairs have been nominated by the respective groups. For the drafting committee, His Excellency Mr. Georgi Molnar of Hungary. For the credentials committee, His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Hussein Bar Al-Ulum of the Republic of Iraq. May I take it that the conference wishes to elect Ambassador Georgi Molnar and Ambassador Mohammed Hussein Bar Al-Ulum by acclamation? It is so decided. I would like to congratulate you on the election to your very important and demanding posts. I look forward to good and successful cooperation with all of you in discharging our duties. In accordance with Rule 5 of the Rules of Procedures, the conference will elect, inter alia, 2 vice chairs for each of the 3 main committees, the drafting committee and the credentials committee. In this connection, I have received the following nominations for the posts of vice chairs from the various groups. For Main Committee 1, His Excellency Mr. Thomas Goebbels of Germany. For Main Committee 2, His Excellency Mr. Al-Hakam Dandi of the Syrian Arab Republic, and His Excellency, Her Excellency Mrs. Olayth Fitzmaurice of Ireland. For the drafting committee, His Excellency Mr. Simon Cloberry of the United Kingdom. For the credentials committee, His Excellency Mr. Sigurd Schjelstrøde of Belgium. If there is no objection, may I take it that the conference wishes to approve these nominations? It is so decided. I would like to congratulate you on your election and look forward to our successful cooperation. I will address the issue of vacant posts at the first meeting of the General Committee to be held on Tuesday, tomorrow, 2nd of August 2022. I should now like to proceed to item 9 of the provisional agenda, the election of vice presidents of the conference. According to Rule 5 of the Rules of Procedures, the conference shall elect 34 vice presidents. Have received the following candidatures for the posts of vice presidents: from the group of Eastern European states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Romania, Slovenia, and Ukraine. From the Western group, Australia, Austria, Canada, Ireland, Japan, New Zealand, Sweden, United Kingdom, Finland, and France. From the group of non-aligned and other states, Algeria, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Morocco, Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, and China. May I take it that the conference wishes to approve these candidatures? Objections? It is so decided. I should now proceed to item 10 of the provisional agenda, the appointment of the members of the Credentials Committee. Rule 3 of the Rules of Procedures provides that, in addition to the election of the chair and 2 vice chairs, the conference shall appoint 6 members of the Credential Committee on the proposal of the President of the conference. Accordingly, I propose the following members of the Credential Committees: Mrs. Silvia Balac of Hungary, Mrs. Nelly Bogomilova-Rasheva of Bulgaria, Mr. Jean-Philippe Alauzet-Brois of Canada, and Mr. Jeremy Faust of the Holy See. If there is no objection, may I take it that the conference agrees with this proposal? It is so decided. In accordance with the established practice, the report of the Credential Committee will be submitted to the conference after the committee has met to examine the credentials of the representative to the conference. I would now like to proceed to item 11 of the provisional agenda, the confirmation of the nomination of the Secretary General of the conference. You will recall that at its second session, the preparatory committee decided to invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, in consultation with the members of the preparatory committee, to nominate an official to act as provisional Secretary General of the conference. At its third session, the preparatory committee was informed that, in response to that request, the Secretary General of the United Nations, following consultations with the members of the preparatory committee, had nominated Mr. Yuan Tudor from the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs to serve in that capacity. The said parties were duly informed of the nomination. May I take it that the conference wishes to confirm Mr. Yuan Tudor as Secretary General of the 10th Review Conference of the Parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons? It is so decided, and I'm very pleased and relieved that we have done it. I wish to congratulate my dear friend, Mr. Yuan Tudor, on his confirmation as Secretary General of the conference, and I'm counting on your full support during these 4 weeks. I would like now to take up item 12 of the provisional agenda, adoption of the agenda of the conference. May I take it that the conference concurs with the provisional agenda as contained in Annex Roman 4 of the final report of the preparatory committee, document MPT-Conf 2020-1. See no objections. It is so decided. I would now like to proceed to the allocation of items to the main committees and the establishment of subsidiary bodies to the main committees. A decision on the allocation of items to the main committees of the conference was adopted at the third session of the preparatory committee and is contained in Annex Roman 5 of the final report of the preparatory committee. May I take it that the conference wishes to proceed accordingly? It is so decided. Turning to subsidiary bodies, as state parties are aware, at the open-ended consultations I held in New York, Geneva, and Vienna, as well as virtually in the all-states formats on 21st July 2022, I share the content of my consultations with delegations regarding the establishments of subsidiary bodies that are expected to provide a focused consideration of specific relevant areas. It will be recalled that in Decision 1 of the 1995 Review and Extension Conference, and I quote, it was agreed that subsidiary bodies could be established within the respective main committees for specific issues relevant to the treaty, so as to provide for a focused consideration of such issues," unquote. This was also reaffirmed in the consensus outcome of the 2000 Review Conference with the agreement on improving the effectiveness of the strengthened review process. I have drafted a proposal based on the outcome of my consultations, and to facilitate formal adoption, I have requested the Secretariat to distribute document MPT-Conf 2020-L1 in all languages. This paper contains a draft decision on the establishment of subsidiary bodies to the main committees. Following its adoption, this document will be issued as an official document of the conference. Before proceeding to the adoption, I would like to communicate to you the names of the proposed chairs of subsidiary bodies. For Subsidiary Body 1 in Main Committee 1, Her Excellency Mrs. Lajezara Stoeva of Bulgaria. For Subsidiary Body 2 in Main Committee 2, Her Excellency Mrs. Annika Markovic of Sweden. And for Subsidiary Body 3 in Main Committee 3, His Excellency Mr. Philbert Johnson of Ghana. As part of its overall allocation of time, it is proposed that each main committee will hold at least 4 meetings of its subsidiary bodies. May I take it that the conference wishes to agree to the establishment of subsidiary bodies to the main committees as contained in document MPT-Conf 2020-L1? I see no objection. It is so decided. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would now like to turn to the draft program of work circulated as document MPT-Conf 2020-INF-3-Rev1. This draft was submitted to assist delegations in planning. As state parties are aware, following my consultations with delegations, the draft program of work will guide our work during the conference. We will leave flexibilities in adjusting the program in order to take into account any changed circumstances and to ensure we are utilizing our time as effectively as possible. Further to the adoption of the decision on the subsidiary bodies, the program of work will reflect the time and room allocated to their meetings. I will utilize the assistance of the General Committee regarding the general conduct of the business of the conference and will seek the conference consideration if issues arise that necessitate changes to how we structure our work. Taking this into account, may I take it that the conference wishes to take note of the draft proposed program of work as contained in document MPT-Conf 2020-INF-3-Rev1. If it is the case, the work of the conference will proceed accordingly. The conference will now take a decision on item 14 of the agenda, namely adoption of arrangements for meeting the cost of the conference. In this, to submit a draft document that reflects the schedule of the division of costs based on the actual participation of state parties in the conference. This document is to be seen in conjunction with Rule 12 and the appendix of the Rules of Procedures, which the conference adopted on 1st August 2022. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my intention to immediately start with the general debate, as we have many high-level dignitaries inscribed on the list of speakers. At this stage, 133 delegations have inscribed on the list of speakers for the general debate, which is planned to continue until 4th of August 2022. I wish to inform delegates that the list of speakers will be closed at 5 p.m. this evening. I would therefore encourage all those delegations wishing to speak during the general debate and which have not yet inscribed their names on the list of speakers to do so before closing the list. I would also like to remind you, as indicated in the revised version of Information Note 1 of 9th of May 2022, that group statements should not exceed 8 minutes and national statements should not exceed 5 minutes. Similarly, statements in the exercise of the right of reply should not exceed 5 minutes for the first intervention and 3 minutes for the second. In accordance with established practice, all statements by the representative of state parties are made from the rostrum. I should like to encourage delegations to be present in meeting rooms at the scheduled time in order to promote the punctuality and efficiency of the conference proceedings. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, while we saw an improvement in the epidemiological situation compared to the last 2 years, we also recognize that we are not free from the coronavirus and its impact. As such, there is a need to be prudent. We must each continue to do our part in reducing the risk of exposure for ourselves and for our colleagues. UN Medical Services recommend not coming to the headquarters under any circumstances if one experiences symptoms related to the COVID-19 or symptoms of an upper respiratory tract infection. With a view to mitigating the impact of the large number of participants, in particular during the general debate, and as informed by the Secretariat at our informal consultations on 21st July, it is recommended that masks are to be worn by all attendees at all times when indoors, except when directly addressing a meeting, like I'm doing right now. All delegations are encouraged to manage COVID-19 cases and determine any subsequent action regarding case exposures among their own attendees, including notification to other delegations, to me, or to the Secretary General of the conference. Also, such approaches will be handled with full confidentiality and privacy and are intended solely to improve safety for all. The Occupational Safety and Health Committee of the UN will continue to closely monitor the COVID-19 metrics in your city, as well as the impact on UN capacity and operations. I now have the honor to give the floor to the first speaker on the list of our general debate, His Excellency Josiah Voreke Bainimarama, Prime Minister and Minister for Itaukei Affairs, Sugar Industry, Foreign Affairs and Forestry of the Republic of Fiji, who will address the conference on behalf of the Pacific Island Forum, to be followed by a statement in his national capacity. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Josiah Voreke Bainimarama, Prime Minister and Minister for Itaukei Affairs, Sugar Industry, Foreign Affairs and Forestry of the Republic of Fiji. I invite him to address the conference on behalf of the Pacific Island Forum and then to deliver his national statement.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Secretary General, it is an honor to be providing the first statement of this 10th Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference on behalf of the parties to the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, the Treaty of Rarotonga, and as chair of the Pacific Islands Forum, together representing Australia, Cook Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Kiribati, Nauru, New Zealand,
Niue, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Republic of Marshall Islands, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and my own country, Fiji. Mr. President, it is now 36 years since the entry into force of our nuclear free zone treaty. This was a proud moment, but one that was born out of the devastation of decades of nuclear testing and growing concerns about burgeoning nuclear weapons stockpiles. This experience made clear to our countries the risks of the nuclear arms race and of catastrophic nuclear war. It made clear the ongoing importance of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, including, of course, its disarmament obligations under Article 6 and its non-proliferation provisions, which have drastically limited the emergence of new nuclear possessor states. Our Treaty of Rarotonga reinforces our commitment to these vital objectives. Fast forwarding to now, Mr. President, 35 years later, the threat posed by nuclear weapons continues. This has been made all too clear by recent events, and we condemn unequivocally Russia's thinly veined threats to use nuclear weapons. The slow pace of disarmament is of deep concern to our Pacific community. We are particularly concerned by increases in nuclear weapons stockpiles, modernization programs, the development of new types of weapons, and reductions in transparency. The disarmament obligations contained in Article 6 remains vital. We strongly call on all nuclear weapon states to implement their nuclear disarmament obligations under Article 6 of the NPT and honor the commitments they have made, including those emanating from the NPT review conferences. For us, the ongoing struggle with the legacy of nuclear testing, from transboundary contamination of homes and habitats to higher numbers of birth defects and cancers, gives rise to an acute awareness in the Pacific region of the threats posed by nuclear testing and dumping. This is why, Mr. President, the Treaty of Rarotonga was the first nuclear weapons free zone treaty to include a dumping provision for radioactive waste and radioactive matter, a provision that was later emulated in the Bangkok Treaty. It reflects our collective responsibility for and shared stewardship of our Blue Pacific. We hereby reaffirm our determination for a region free of environmental pollution by radioactive waste and other radioactive matter. Mr. President, given our shared heritage and collective responsibilities for the natural environment, we attach great importance to achieving the entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. We reiterate our calls for the remaining states to sign and ratify the treaty, in particular those states whose ratification is required to bring the treaty into legal effect. We note, Mr. President, the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in January last year, and the first meeting of state parties to the treaty in June 2022, which adopted the Vienna Declaration titled Our Commitment to a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. Mr. President, for our own treaty, the Treaty of Rarotonga, we welcome the announcement by the United States in 2010 of its intention to ratify all protocols to the treaty. We call on the United States to now take the necessary steps towards ratification so that our treaty can have its full effect. Mr. President, our Treaty of Rarotonga includes a specific provision requiring parties to support the continued effectiveness of the international non-proliferation system based on the NPT and the IAEA safeguard system. In including this provision, we recognize the interplay between three pillars of the NPT and the importance of each of them. Our commitment to them stands today. The safe and secure shipment of radioactive materials is of importance to our region. We strongly urge all non-nuclear weapon states to fully comply with the NPT requirement to accept safeguards on peaceful nuclear activities and all related international law obligations relating to nuclear safety to ensure the prevention of harm to our ocean and our blue Pacific, particularly from radioactive disasters and the transboundary spread of radioactive material and radioactive waste. Mr. President, we see the Treaty of Rarotonga as a living document and a symbol of our region's long-standing opposition to nuclear weapons. We stand together, ready to support your efforts at this review conference in support of a credible, ambitious outcome that reflects the ongoing importance of the NPT to the peace and security of our region and the world. I would now like to speak in my national capacity as the Fijian Prime Minister. Mr. President, generations of Pacific Islanders have waited in vain for an apology, for health support, for reassurances that there will be no repeat of testing, for reassurances that there will be no waste disposal, and for reaffirmations that nuclear weapons will never be deployed in the blue Pacific again. Mothers of deformed babies in the Marshall Islands have waited. Families in French Polynesia who have lost loved ones too soon have waited. We are still waiting. And we look to this 10th review for greater commitment, far greater commitment by all countries to show us that they are taking actions to reduce their stockpiles of nuclear weapons. So long as the nuclear weapons maintain these arsenals, no one can sleep soundly. That is because, Mr. President, any person anywhere on the planet can potentially experience the same suffering the people of the Pacific have known and still know. Let's be clear, mutually assured destruction is no assurance of peace. Ask the people of Ukraine, ask the people of Syria, ask every victim of conflict anywhere in the world about the false peace these weapons promise. Yes, we have seen no mushroom clouds, but we have seen relentless destruction and devastation cities like Aleppo and Mariupol leveled to the ground. Ask the victims of climate-driven disasters about the resources we waste on these weapons, the public funds, the ingenuity, and the human capital that could and should be spent improving and protecting lives. Responsible use of nuclear energy could be part of the solution. And Mr. President, ask Fiji's peacekeepers who serve in conflict areas around the world what true peace really entails. It is not forged at the end of a rifle or within the sights of a missile. It comes from understanding, it comes from equality, and it comes from opportunity. Mr. President, we know these weapons will not disappear overnight. And we also recognize the beneficial peaceful uses of the atom for energy and medicine, for example. But it's common sense to recognize the complete and senseless waste that existing nuclear arsenals represent. We are here to urge the nuclear states to put forward comprehensive and transparent reports on their disarmament efforts, efforts that must be designed to point away from any new technology that would make these weapons more effective, more efficient, more powerful, or easier for more parties to acquire. They owe this to their citizens as much as they owe it to us. These aging relics, Mr. President, are a danger to everyone, whether they are pointed at you or siloed in your backyard. No one should leave one accident or one move of aggression away from annihilation. Mr. President, our commitment to a Pacific that is free of nuclear weapons is defining for our region. This is the commitment that I have also made as the Prime Minister. But it is also personal, a commitment that I have made as a son, because I have waited a lifetime for someone to take responsibility for deliberately exposing my late father, Ratunoke Mbanimarama, in the sail as he commanded, to the testing of a nuclear bomb. We welcome initiatives by the non-aligned movement, as well as the proposals advanced by Canada, Nigeria, and others. No nation can pick and choose when it cares about human life and when it advances multilateralism. And we cannot live here without a final document. It is our shared responsibility as leaders to make this conference count for the peace-loving people we represent. Thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the conference, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Aitaukei Affairs, Sugar Industry, Foreign Affairs and Forestry of the Republic of Fiji for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Kishida Fumio, Prime Minister of Japan. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming the Prime Minister of Japan, and I invite him to address the conference.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, today I have come to this review conference driven by a strong sense of urgency. As Foreign Minister, I attended the 2015 review conference, which ended without reaching consensus. Since then, the division within the international community has become only greater. In particular, the threat to use nuclear weapons by Russia in its aggression against Ukraine has contributed to worldwide concern that yet another catastrophe by nuclear weapon use is a real possibility. I cannot but admit that the path to a world without nuclear weapons has become even harder. Nevertheless, giving up is not an option. As a Prime Minister from Hiroshima, I believe that we must take every realistic measure towards a world without nuclear weapons, step by step, however difficult the path may be. The very starting point of this endeavor is the NPT. The NPT has served as the cornerstone of the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime in realizing international peace and security. Maintaining and strengthening the NPT regime is the interest of the entire international community. Let us join forces to achieve a meaningful outcome at this conference. Together with all of delegates concerned here today, Japan is determined to firmly uphold the NPT as its guardian. Mr. President, as a first step of a realistic roadmap, which would take us from the reality we face in the harsh security environment to the ideal of a world without nuclear weapons, we will work on the Hiroshima Action Plan, which is rooted in the following 5 actions, while simultaneously making efforts to reduce nuclear risks. As the first action, I call for a shared recognition on the importance of continuing the record of non-use of nuclear weapons. We should never tolerate the threat of the use of nuclear weapons, such as that made recently by Russia, let alone the use of nuclear weapons. We must ensure that Nagasaki remains the last place to suffer atomic bombing. The second action is to enhance transparency. Transparency is the foundation of all nuclear disarmament measures. I call on nuclear weapon states to enhance the transparency of their nuclear forces. In particular, I call on all nuclear weapon states to disclose information on the status of production of fissile materials. This is an important step to gather momentum for the commencement of negotiations on an FMCT. The third action is to maintain the decreasing trend of the global nuclear stockpile. While the number has significantly decreased since the peak of this Cold War, there are still more than 10,000 nuclear weapons in the world. Maintaining this decreasing trend is extremely important to getting closer to a world without nuclear weapons. To achieve this, I call on all nuclear weapon states to engage in a responsible manner. In this vein, Japan supports the dialogue conducted between the United States and Russia for further reduction and encourages the US and China to engage in a bilateral dialogue on nuclear arms control and disarmament. We should breathe new life into the discussions on the CTBT and FMCT. In order to build momentum towards facilitating the entry into force of the CTBT, I will convene a meeting of the CTBT friends at the leader level during the United Nations General Assembly in September. I reiterate our call for the immediate commencement of negotiations on FMCT. The fourth action is to secure nuclear non-proliferation and promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy upon that basis. While there are concerns about the possibility of another nuclear test, Japan will address North Korea's nuclear and missile issues in coordination with the international community. The return to compliance with the Iran nuclear agreement is also yet to be realized. Japan will contribute proactively towards facilitating dialogue. The peaceful uses of nuclear energy should go hand in hand with nuclear safety. The recent attacks on nuclear facilities by Russia must not be tolerated. Building on the lessons learned from the 2011 accident, Japan will continue to reconstruct the affected areas and address various challenges associated with the decommissioning of the nuclear power station. In close cooperation with the international community, including the IAEA, Japan will continue to advance its efforts in a transparent manner in accordance with domestic and international safety standards. For the fifth action, Japan will promote the accurate understanding on the realities of nuclear weapons use through encouraging a visit to Hiroshima and Nagasaki by international leaders and others. In this connection, I welcome the visit by Secretary General Antonio Guterres to Hiroshima on August 6th. Japan shall make a contribution of $10 million to the United Nations in order to set up a Youth Leader Fund for a world without nuclear weapons. By inviting future leaders to Japan and providing them with opportunity to learn firsthand the realities of nuclear weapon use, this will create a global network among the youth towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. In order to build global momentum towards a world without nuclear weapons, I decided to hold the first meeting of the new international group of eminent persons on November 23rd in Hiroshima, which will enjoy the involvement of former and incumbent political leaders of the world. Mr. President, in 2023, Japan will host the G7 summit in Hiroshima. It is my intention to demonstrate our firm commitment from Hiroshima to never repeat the catastrophe of atomic bombings. Today, I have folded a paper crane and brought it with me here. Sasaki Sadako, the girl whose image served as a model of the Children's Peace Monument in the Hiroshima Peace Park, kept folding paper cranes wishing to live. Today, paper cranes have come to symbolize worldwide prayers for peace and a world without nuclear weapons. I will make steps towards a world without nuclear weapons together with all the people who share the common aspiration around the world. Thank you.
On behalf of the conference, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of Japan for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Ayman Safari, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, to take the floor on behalf of the Arab group, to be followed by a statement in his national capacity. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have a great pleasure in welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, and I invite him to address the conference.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Mr. President, dear colleagues, peace be upon you all. It is my pleasure to read before you the statement of the Arab group for the purposes of our conference, and the statement will be filed with the Conference Secretariat. I would like to start by congratulating you, Mr. President, in the name of the Arab group for your election as President of the 10th Review Conference of the parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and I assure you of our support for the statement delivered by NAM. Mr. President, the Arab states ascribe great importance to the NPT regimen and to the implementation of the provisions of the treaty. And in our group, we insist on the importance of working towards enhancing the efficiency of the NPT and preventing the transfer of nuclear technology for non-peace
من التزام نظام الضمانات الشاملة حجر الزاوية لنظام التحقق الدولي في مجال عدم الانتشار والذي يسهم والبروتوكول الإضافي ذو الطابع الطوعي في تحقيق أهداف المعاهدة. تعد الوكالة الدولية للطاقة الذرية الهيئة الوحيدة المعنية بالتحقق مع الحفاظ على الحق الأصيل غير القابل للتصرف للدول الأعضاء وفقا للمادة الرابعة من المعاهدة فيما يتعلق بالاستخدامات السلمية ورفض أي محاولات لفرض قيود أو شروط عليها. ويمثل انضمام جميع الدول العربية للمعاهدة وإخضاع منشآتها النووية لنظام الضمانات الشاملة دليلا على التزامها نزع السلاح وعدم الانتشار النووي. مصداقية المعاهدة تقوم على التوازن بين ركائزها الثلاث من ناحية وتحقيق علنيتها من ناحية أخرى. السيد الرئيس، يتعين التذكير بأنه أمكن التوصل لهذه المعاهدة استنادا لصفقة تلزم الدول النووية التخلص من أسلحتها في مقابل التزام الدول الأخرى عدم السعي لامتلاك هذه الأسلحة. وتلحظ المجموعة العربية أن الدول النووية لم تنفذ التزامها في وضع إطار زمني لنزع السلاح، وعليه تعرب المجموعة عن بالغ قلقها من محاولات بعض الدول النووية إعادة تفسير التزاماتها وفقا للمادة السادسة أو ربط تنفيذها بشروط مسبقة. وتؤكد المجموعة أن استمرار الدول النووية في تبني عقائد أمنية وعسكرية تتيح استخدام الأسلحة النووية وتطويرها يتعارض مع المعاهدة. وعليه تدعو المجموعة العربية إلى تبني صكوك دولية ملزمة تمنح الدول غير النووية ضمانات أمنية غير مشروطة بعدم استخدام الأسلحة النووية أو التهديد باستخدامها ضدها من قبل الدول النووية. سيد الرئيس، يواجه نظام عدم الانتشار عددا من التحديات منها غياب الجهود لتحقيق عالمية معاهدة عدم انتشار الأسلحة النووية ومعاهدة الحظر الشامل للتجارب النووية وتكرار حالات عدم الامتثال بأحكام معاهدة عدم الانتشار وغياب التوازن بين نظم الضمانات المطبقة على أطراف المعاهدة وبين تلك المطبقة على غير الأطراف. وتشير المجموعة هنا إلى أن عدم انضمام إسرائيل للمعاهدة يحرم الوكالة الدولية من استخدام أي آليات شاملة للتحقق من طبيعة برنامجها النووي. لذا تؤكد المجموعة العربية على الآتي: أهمية قيام الدول الأطراف لا سيما الدول النووية ببذل جهود لتحقيق عالمية المعاهدة وفرض حظر على نقل المواد والتكنولوجيا النووية إلى الدول غير الأطراف في المعاهدة ورفض إضفاء صفة المشروعية على الوضع النووي لتلك الدول. وتؤكد المجموعة على ضرورة وقف أي تعاون فني مع الدول غير الأطراف بالمعاهدة لا سيما إسرائيل لحين انضمامها كدول غير نووية للمعاهدة وإخضاع كافة منشآتها النووية لنظام الضمانات الشامل. وتؤكد أهمية تعزيز دور الوكالة الدولية للطاقة الذرية في التحقق بصورة مهنية ومحايدة مع دعوة الدول التي تثار تساؤلات بشأن برامجها النووية إلى التعاون بشكل كامل مع الوكالة وتعزيز الثقة في سلمية برامجها. وتؤكد على ضرورة مراعاة أن إقامة المنطقة الخالية من السلاح النووي في الشرق الأوسط قد تستدعي تطبيق نظام تحقق إقليمي أكثر صرامة من نظام التحقق الدولي الراهن مع الإقرار بأولوية تحقيق عالمية المعاهدة ونظام الضمانات الشاملة في الشرق الأوسط. كما تؤكد المجموعة العربية على أهمية معاهدة الحظر الشامل للتجارب النووية في تدعيم منظومة نزع السلاح وعدم الانتشار النوويين والمسؤولية الخاصة للدول النووية والدول التي لم تنضم لمعاهدة عدم الانتشار في تعزيز الجهود لتحقيق عالمية معاهدة الحظر الشامل للتجارب النووية وتيسير دخولها حيز التنفيذ. السيد الرئيس، سلم المجتمع الدولي بأهمية إقامة المناطق الخالية في جميع أنحاء العالم لتوطيد نظام عدم الانتشار ونزع السلاح. وتؤكد المجموعة العربية أن مسؤولية إنشاء المنطقة الخالية في الشرق الأوسط هي مسؤولية جماعية الجماعي، وأن قرار العام 1995 الخاص بالشرق الأوسط جزء لا يتجزأ من صفقة التمديد اللانهائي للمعاهدة. وتشدد المجموعة على أن قرار العام 1995 يعد ساريا لحين تنفيذه وتحقيق أهدافه بشكل كامل. وتأسف المجموعة لعدم عقد مؤتمر العام 2012، فإن المجموعة تعيد تأكيد رفضها لأي مزاعم تدفع بأن المحافل متعددة الأطراف لا تعد مناسبة لتنفيذ القرار العام 1995 أو وضع شروط مسبقة لتنفيذه. وفي هذا السياق تود المجموعة العربية التذكير باعتماد الجمعية العامة المقرر رقم 73/456 الخاص بتكليف السكرتير العام بعقد مؤتمر للتفاوض على معاهدة ملزمة حول إنشاء منطقة خالية من الأسلحة النووية وأسلحة الدمار الشامل الأخرى في الشرق الأوسط بتوافق الآراء والإرادة الحرة للدول الأعضاء، على أن يكون قرار العام 1995 مرجعية المؤتمر. وترحب المجموعة العربية بانعقاد الدورة الأولى للمؤتمر في تشرين الثاني 2019 برئاسة المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، والدورة الثانية في تشرين الثاني 2021 برئاسة دولة الكويت بمشاركة جميع الأطراف المدعوة للمؤتمر ما عدا إسرائيل. وتحث المجموعة جميع الأطراف على المشاركة البناءة في المؤتمر للتوصل إلى معاهدة ملزمة حول إنشاء المنطقة الخالية. وتطالب المجموعة مؤتمر المراجعة العاشرة بدعم جميع المساعي لتنفيذ قرار العام 1995 بما في ذلك عبر المؤتمر الأممي. السيد الرئيس، فيما يتعلق بالاستخدامات السلمية، تتطلع الدول العربية إلى تطوير برامج الاستخدامات السلمية للطاقة الذرية لتحقيق التنمية المستدامة عبر تطوير التشريعات الوطنية وتأسيس قاعدة علمية وبحثية، خطوة نحو تعاون عربي مشترك في هذا المجال. وتؤكد المجموعة أهمية برامج التعاون الفني للوكالة الدولية للطاقة الذرية وأهمية توفير الموارد المالية لها. وتؤكد المجموعة أهمية الشفافية والالتزام بمعايير الأمن والأمان النوويين، وهذان يظلان مسؤولية الدول. كما تشدد المجموعة على أهمية التعاون الدولي ضمن الوكالة الدولية والاتفاقات الدولية ذات الصلة بالأمان النووي، وتدعو الدول التي تشغل مفاعلات نووية لتوليد الطاقة الكهربائية للانضمام إلى هذه الاتفاقيات والاستفادة من خدمات التقييم التي تقدمها الوكالة الدولية وإشهار التقارير المتعلقة بخدمات التقييم. كما ترفض المجموعة العربية تحميل الدول أي التزامات إضافية تحول دون استخدامها أو توظيفها للطاقة النووية السلمية وفقا لأحكام المعاهدة. أشكرك السيد الرئيس، وأستأذنك أن أنتقل إلى كلمة المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، وأضيف فقط أنه من المهم جدا أن نستمر في العمل من أجل جعل منطقة الشرق الأوسط منطقة خالية من جميع أسلحة الدمار الشامل، فمنطقتنا تعاني ما يكفيها من الأزمات ولا تحتاج بالتأكيد إلى مشكلة أخرى يكون سببها دخول الأسلحة النووية إليها. المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية تلتزم بالكامل بدعم المعاهدة وتلتزم بالعمل مع المجتمع الدولي من أجل ضمان الالتزام المعاهدة وتنفيذ كل أحكامها، وخصوصا فيما يتعلق بمنطقة الشرق الأوسط خالية من جميع أسلحة الدمار الشامل. وكمؤشر آخر على التزام المملكة بعدم نشر الأسلحة النووية، فإننا الدولة الوحيدة من المنطقة العضو في مجموعة ستوكهولم التي تعمل من أجل ضمان بيئة دولية تؤكد التزام المعاهدة وتقليل المخاطر وانضمام كل الدول إلى المعاهدة وتنفيذ التزاماتها. وأؤكد أيضا سيد الرئيس ضرورة العمل أيضا على حل جميع المشاكل التي تواجه منطقتنا وحل الأزمات التي تواجهها، وفي مقدمها القضية الفلسطينية على أساس حل الدولتين، والعمل من أجل حل الأزمة السورية والأزمة الليبية وعديد أزمات أخرى تحرم منطقتنا حقها في تحقيق الأمن والاستقرار
other parts of our region suffering from troubles that need to be resolved because these are real impediments that correspond to one another and that are mutually reinforcing. And so without their mutual resolution, we are going to still see a Middle East that is struggling, and we cannot tolerate any kind of arms race in the region. And Jordan also bolsters every effort that will seek to revive the nuclear talks with Iran. I would like to thank you, Mr. President, and I wish you successful proceedings, and we hope that this conference will be another stepping stone in favor of the further fulfillment of the goals of the NPT and in favor of the full implementation of the spirit and letter of the text. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan for his statement, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I now have the honor to invite Her Excellency Tanja Fajon, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, to take the floor. May I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. I have a great pleasure in welcoming the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia and invite her to address the conference.
Mr. President, I would like to congratulate you on your election. We count on your wisdom and political acumen, and I assure you of our full support. We were pleased to host you in Slovenia in September last year, when we discussed many important issues relevant to global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. Mr. President, in Europe, we are facing the most deteriorated security environment in decades. Its severe implications resonate across the world. Slovenia condemns the unprovoked Russia's aggression against Ukraine, which is a flagrant violation of international law and global norms. We urge Russia to immediately cease its hostilities and withdraw from independent Ukraine's sovereign territory. Slovenia will continue to provide humanitarian support to the Ukrainian people, as well as support their inherent right to self-defense. We welcome the agreement to resume the grain exports through Ukrainian ports and the departure of the first ship from Odessa port this morning. This is an important sign that dialogue is possible in search to ease human suffering and to mitigate the risk of a global food crisis. Blatant violation of the Budapest Memorandum, unacceptable nuclear rhetoric, and reckless acts against Ukraine's nuclear facilities, which goes against the letter and spirit of the NPT, must stop. These actions further aggravate an already eroded global nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, and arms control regime. The resulting security challenges call for a stronger, not weaker application of international law, norms, and institutions. Slovenia believes that it is high time to reaffirm collectively the NPT as the cornerstone of disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful uses of nuclear energy. We also need to make every effort to strengthen the authority of the treaty across all three mutually reinforcing pillars. Slovenia calls on all states, which still have not done so, to join the treaty as non-nuclear weapon states. Mr. President, Slovenia remains committed to a world free of nuclear weapons, in accordance with Article 6 of the NPT. We are convinced that achieving this goal is possible only through a progressive approach. We consider the efforts to advance strategic risk reduction arrangements as a concrete step towards this ultimate objective and not as a tool to replace it. Slovenia also fully supports practical approaches in this area, like the Stockholm Initiative for Nuclear Disarmament. Furthermore, we welcome the extension of the New START Treaty in 2021 and supported the relaunch of the Strategic Stability Dialogue, which has now regrettably stalled due to Russia's war in Ukraine. In our view, such new arrangements should address new strategic systems and include the participation of China. Let me also emphasize that as a country with a fully fledged civilian nuclear program, we stand ready to create new opportunities for other countries to benefit from peaceful uses of nuclear energy, science, and technology. This is all the more important in light of global efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Slovenia will remain a steadfast supporter of the EIA peaceful use programs also financially. Out of further desire to contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security, Slovenia has decided to present its candidacy for a non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council for the period 2024-2025. Mr. President, there should be no doubt about the urgent need for the universalization of the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and Additional Protocol. Both constitute the current verification standard. We therefore call on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to take concrete steps towards complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Let me also underline Slovenia's firm support to the ongoing intensive diplomatic efforts aimed to preserve and restore full and effective implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And Mr. President, in conclusion, the task before us appears almost insurmountable. However, we must not give up, but rather demonstrate our resolve to advance the NPT. It is also for this reason that all of us, states parties to the NPT, should work constructively to achieve a meaningful outcome of this review conference. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia for her statement and for the kind words addressed to the Presidency. May I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Jeppe Kofod, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Denmark, who will make a statement on behalf of the Nordic countries, followed by a statement on his national capacity. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming the Foreign Minister of Denmark, and I invite him to address the conference.
Mr. President, I'm very pleased to address this assembly on behalf of the Nordic countries, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Denmark. Allow me to congratulate you on assuming the office of President of this review conference. We are convinced that your able leadership will facilitate a successful outcome. Rest assured of our full support. Mr. President, the Nordic countries condemn in the strongest way the unprovoked and unjustified aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. Russia's invasion of a sovereign state is a gross violation of international law, including the UN Charter, and it severely undermines European and global security and stability. We also condemn Belarus for its involvement in the Russian aggression against Ukraine. President Putin's threats of use of nuclear weapons seriously undermines and has a significant negative impact on the nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. Mr. President, 2020 marked the 50th anniversary for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the cornerstone of the global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. For half a century, the treaty has made people more secure from nuclear havoc, and it has facilitated peaceful uses. We must use this opportunity to commend its achievements and to strengthen the implementation of the treaty. In challenging times, it is more important than ever to safeguard the nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control architecture. We are convinced that multilateral solutions and respect for international rule-based order are the best way to solve global problems. We strongly support all three pillars of the NPT and continue to promote a comprehensive, balanced, and full implementation of the 2010 Review Conference Action Plan. We stress the need to implement all obligations under the NPT and also comments made during previous review conferences. This includes concrete progress towards the ultimate goal of a world free from nuclear weapons. The Nordics have presented important and concrete actions to further the implementation of the NPT, including through the Stockholm Initiative on Nuclear Disarmament. The Stepping Stones working paper offers practical measures that can be taken to advance nuclear disarmament, build confidence, and lay the ground for even further steps. The Nordics also support the initiative's working paper on nuclear risk reduction. While not a substitute for disarmament, risk reduction is a step on the way. We urge the conference to consider the recommendations, which include a comprehensive process to follow up within the NPT. The Nordics have been instrumental in advancing the work on nuclear disarmament verification through the UN GTE and initiatives like the Quad Partnership and the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification. We are encouraged that this work is gaining momentum and encourage the conference to highlight and support efforts on nuclear disarmament verification. The work of the Creating an Environment for Nuclear Disarmament initiative has also shown its value in providing a framework for furthering the exchange of views. Mr. President, before the Russian aggression against Ukraine, there were some positive developments. Among those, the 5-year extension of the New START Treaty, the strategic stability dialogue between the United States and Russia, the restatement of the 1986 Reykjavik Summit Declaration, and the P5 Declaration after the Paris meeting. We attach the highest importance to the New START Treaty and call for seeking further reductions. A future agreement should possibly include all nuclear weapons categories. We would welcome further discussion on confidence building, transparency, risk reduction, and verification activities in a future agreement. China's arsenal is growing. We call on China to actively engage in processes on arms control as a responsible nuclear weapon state. Mr. President, last year marked the 25th anniversary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. We strongly urge states that have not yet done so, in particular the remaining Annex II states, to sign and ratify the treaty securing a legally binding moratorium on nuclear testing. The Nordics support a working paper acknowledging the close links between CTBT and NPT. We also reaffirm our support for immediate negotiation and conclusion of a fissile material cutoff treaty. Mr. President, non-proliferation and peaceful use are central to the overall implementation of NPT. We pledge our full and continued support for the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency in its crucial role underpinning the implementation of the NPT through its safeguards system. Developments on the Korean Peninsula remain central to peace and development in the region and beyond. The continued nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program of DPRK are of utmost concern. We fully support efforts to preserve the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. We welcome the stated intention of the United States to return to JCPOA, and we urge Iran to return to full compliance without delay. Mr. President, we underline the strong role of the civil society. Gender equality, empowerment, and full inclusion of women and youth as the leaders of tomorrow should be the order of the day. Incorporation of a gender perspective will lead to more solid and sustainable outcomes and thereby strengthen international peace and security. The Nordics are strongly committed to working towards a successful outcome of the 10th NPT Review Conference. We stand ready to contribute to this goal. Thank you so much for your attention.
I thank the Foreign Minister of Denmark for his statement. And now I have the honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Antony John Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States of America, to take the floor.
Director General Grossi, thank you all for your long-standing leadership on nonproliferation. I noted that Prime Minister Kishida of Japan is here as well this morning, which sends a very powerful message. Earlier this year, he reaffirmed Japan's commitment to nonproliferation in a joint statement with President Biden. And a very special thanks to the foreign ministers, the deputy foreign ministers, the teams who have traveled to New York for these meetings and to get us off to a good start. It's great to be with all of you here in person today, especially given the critical role the NPT has played in upholding the global non-proliferation regime. More than 5 decades ago, at the height of the Cold War, representatives of 18 nations drafted the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. In the years that followed, nearly every country on Earth has joined the NPT. Countries put safeguards in place to monitor their nuclear programs. Nuclear weapon states moved toward disarmament, including the United States. The number of nuclear weapons in our stockpile is now nearly 90% lower than it was at its height in 1967. The United Nations Security Council affirmed that proliferation constituted a threat to international peace and security. Entire regions, the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Africa, joined Latin America and the Caribbean in declaring themselves nuclear weapons-free zones. And we saw countries use nuclear technology safely and peacefully to improve the lives of millions of people on Earth. So, there is no question that the NPT has made the world safer. But there's also no doubt that it's under increasing strain. And so we come together at a critical moment. The DPRK continues to expand its unlawful nuclear program and continues its ongoing provocations against the region. As we gather today, Pyongyang is preparing to conduct its 7th nuclear test. Iran remains on a path of nuclear escalation. Although it publicly claims to favor a return to mutual compliance with the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, since March, Iran has been either unwilling or unable to accept a deal to achieve precisely that goal. Getting back to the JCPOA remains the best outcome for the United States, for Iran, for the world. In January, President Biden and the leaders of the other NPT nuclear weapon states, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, all affirmed the principle that, and I quote, "A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought." The very next month, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and it's engaged in reckless, dangerous nuclear saber-rattling, with its president warning that those supporting Ukraine's self-defense, quote, risk consequences such as you have never seen in your entire history, end quote. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a brazen violation of international law, including the United Nations Charter. and it's also contrary to the rules-based international order that we all seek to uphold. But critically, and it's directly relevant to what brings us together this month for the NPT Review Conference, its actions are also directly contrary to the assurances that it provided to Ukraine in 1994 in the so-called Budapest Memorandum, assurances of Ukraine's sovereignty and independence that were vital to giving Ukraine the confidence to give up the nuclear weapons it inherited when the Soviet Union dissolved and that were left on its territory. So, what message does this send to any country around the world that may think that it needs to have nuclear weapons to protect, to defend, to deter aggression against its sovereignty and independence? The worst possible message. And so it's directly relevant to what's going on here this month at the United Nations. Most recently, we saw Russia's aggression with its seizure of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest such plant in all of Europe. Russia is now using the plant as a military base to fire at Ukrainians, knowing that they can't and won't shoot back because they might accidentally strike a reactor or highly radioactive waste in storage. That brings the notion of having a human shield to an entirely different and horrific level. The United States believes that all nuclear-armed states have a duty to act responsibly. We've chosen to act with restraint and avoid actions that could unintentionally add to nuclear tensions. For example, by foregoing previously scheduled ICBM tests and not raising the alert status of our nuclear forces in response to Russian saber-rattling. There is no place in our world for nuclear deterrence based on coercion, intimidation, or blackmail. We have to stand together in rejecting this. Together with the United Kingdom and France, we've released a set of principles and best practices that should be expected of every responsible NPT nuclear weapon state, among them that every effort has to be made to ensure that nuclear weapons are not used again. The United States is committed to reducing the role of nuclear weapons and reestablishing our leadership on arms control, and we've undertaken a deliberate policy review toward that goal. We'll continue to emphasize strategic stability, seek to avoid costly arms races, facilitate risk reduction and arms control agreements wherever they are possible. Any country that asks others to reject the pursuit of nuclear weapons also has to be willing to reduce and eventually eliminate their own stockpiles of nuclear weapons. President Biden's commitment to disarmament has long been evident. Just 2 weeks into his term, he extended the New START treaty with Russia until 2026. And that's made our countries and our world safer by preserving verified restrictions on our strategic nuclear arsenals and avoiding an arms race. Earlier today, he reiterated his readiness to negotiate expeditiously a framework to replace New START if Russia is prepared to operate in good faith. We continue to adhere to our policy not to use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states that are party to the NPT and are in compliance with their nuclear nonproliferation obligations. And will continue to implement, to the fullest extent possible, the commitments contained in the final documents of previous NPT review conferences. And as long as nuclear weapons exist, the fundamental role of U.S. nuclear weapons is to deter nuclear attacks on the United States, on our allies and partners. The United States would only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States, its allies, and partners. At this review conference, we hope to make tangible progress on all three pillars of the NPT: nonproliferation, disarmament, the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, and will work with all states parties to a successful outcome. The world must reject the spread of nuclear weapons. That starts with demanding compliance by all NPT state parties, ensuring we have safeguards in place to monitor ourselves, strengthening the IAEA's ability to implement those safeguards. We're encouraging states to adopt a comprehensive safeguards agreement and an additional protocol, which represent together the most rigorous standard of verification. If any NPT state party does pursue nuclear weapons, we have to act as one to bring them back into compliance. Even as we verify that countries are not using their nuclear programs to pursue nuclear weapons, we also have to ensure that the programs are safe and secure. I commend Director General Grossi for his work promoting the safety and security of existing facilities, and especially for all that he's done to help prevent a nuclear catastrophe in Ukraine. This review conference is also an invaluable opportunity to discuss how to reduce the risk of nuclear conflict and the chance of miscommunication during a crisis. The United States is committed to pursuing a comprehensive risk reduction package, including creating secure communications channels among nuclear weapon states. We stand ready to work with all partners, including China and others, on risk reduction and strategic stability efforts. As we look to the future, we also have to strengthen agreements preventing nuclear conflict and create new ones. To cap the growth of nuclear arsenals anywhere in the world, we continue to support the entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. We also stand ready to begin working with partners to restart negotiations this year on the long-delayed fissile material cutoff treaty. Finally, we remain focused on enhancing the peaceful uses of nuclear technology. Nuclear energy technologies are helping the world to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and fight the climate crisis, giving farmers new tools to boost crop yields and tackle global food insecurity, improving our ability to screen for dangerous diseases, and preventing the next pandemic. The United States wants to expand access to these essential benefits for NPT states parties. Together with the United Kingdom, we're launching the Sustained Dialogue on Peaceful Uses to find new ways to use peaceful nuclear energy technology to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're also supporting clean energy innovations, like small nuclear reactors, to combat climate change, ensure reliable access to nuclear power. At the G7 Leaders Summit in Germany just last month, President Biden announced $14 million in funding to support the deployment of small modular reactor power plants in Romania, which will provide zero emissions nuclear energy. Now, some have asked about our new partnership with the United Kingdom and Australia, known as AUKUS. Through this partnership, Australia will acquire submarines. I want to emphasize that these submarines will be nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed. Other countries have this kind of submarine, and these will adhere to the highest safety and non-proliferation standards under the NPT. We're working very closely with the IEA to make sure that that's the case. As we work together across the three pillars of the NPT, we build upon the efforts of so many who have come before us in this room. Last month, we lost one of those leaders, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was deeply committed to nuclear nonproliferation throughout his career. In 2016, Prime Minister Abe and President Obama made a historic visit to Hiroshima together, a place that represents the enormous destruction that nuclear weapons make possible. There, President Obama said, and I quote, "We must have the courage to escape the logic of fear and pursue a world without them," end quote. Prime Minister Abe said this: "We're determined to realize a world free of nuclear weapons, no matter how long or how difficult the road may be." That has to remain the charge for each of us here. To escape the logic of fear, live up to our responsibility to prevent nuclear conflict, to reduce nuclear weapons, to secure nuclear technologies, to advance peace and progress around the world. Thank you very much.
I thank the Secretary of State of the United States of America for his statement and for the kind words addressed to the Presidency. Tengo ahora el honor de invitar a Su Excelencia, el señor Santiago Cafiero, Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores, Comercio Internacional y Culto de la República Argentina, a dirigirse a la conferencia.
Señor Presidente, quisiera comenzar felicitándolo por el compromiso y la determinación con que asumió la responsabilidad de presidir esta 10ª conferencia de examen del Tratado sobre la no proliferación de las armas nucleares. Somos conscientes de que llegamos a esta conferencia en un contexto sumamente desafiante en términos de seguridad
in a very
internacional.
challenging
El mundo
context
está
in terms
asignado
of international
por crecientes
security.
tensiones y
The world
conflictos
is
que escalaron a
pulled
niveles
by
que
increasing
podrían haberse
tensions and
evitado mediante un
conflicts which
compromiso
escalate
mayor
at levels which
con las
could have
dinámicas
been
de la
avoided
negociación y de la
through
paz.
greater commitment to the
Somos conscientes del
dynamics
desafío
of
que representa
negotiation and peace.
abordar el examen de un
We are
tratado
aware of the
fundamental como el
challenge
TNP y
of
construir
dealing with the
consensos
review of an
sustantivos
essential
en
treaty
las
such
próximas
as the
semanas de trabajo.
NPT and
Y
build
somos conscientes también de la existencia
consensus
de
in
avances
the coming weeks of
desiguales
work.
en la
We are also
implementación del
aware of the
TNP
existence of
y de las
unequal
frustraciones
progress in the
que
implementation
ello
of the
puede
NPT
suscitar.
and the
Estos
frustration this
claroscuros
could
han
lead
sido
to. These ups and
sistemáticos
downs
a lo largo de
have
los
been
años.
systematic throughout the years.
Solo este enero, los 5 miembros, se hacía
Just
referencia
this January,
anteriormente,
the 5
los 5 miembros
members,
permanentes del
permanent
Consejo de
members of the
Seguridad
Security
de
Council of
Naciones
the
Unidas,
United
que en
Nations,
conjunto
who
poseen
together
12.270 ojivas nucleares sobre un total de 12.705,
out of a
se
total of
manifestaron contra la proliferación de esas armas y
12,705
afirmaron
spoke
que,
against the
cito,
proliferation
no
of
se puede
those weapons,
ganar
and they
una
affirmed
guerra
that, I
nuclear
quote,
y
"A
que nunca
nuclear
debe
war
librarse.
cannot be won and it should
Sin
never
embargo,
be
en el
waged."
2021,
End quote. However, in
año en que se
2021,
luchaba contra el COVID-19,
during the fight
esos mismos países
against
destinaron
COVID-19,
más de
those same
77.000
countries
millones de dólares para
devoted over
modernizar su
$77
arsenal
million
nuclear.
to modernize their
Apenas un mes
nuclear
después de esa
arsenals.
declaración, la invasión de
Just
Rusia sobre Ucrania
a month
cambió el
after
escenario
that
internacional.
statement,
Y altos líderes mundiales comenzaron incluso
Russia's
a hablar
invasion of
de
Ukraine
la posibilidad de
changed
una
the world
tercera guerra
scenario,
mundial.
and
Sin embargo, la
world
carrera
leaders
armamentística
started to talk about a third world
se venía
war.
desarrollando tiempo atrás.
However, the
Distintos
arms
estudios
race
internacionales
had been
afirman
taking
que los
place for
gastos
some
venían
time.
creciendo ya desde 2015.
Different international studies
Y
show that the
solamente para el
expenses had been growing
2020 y
since
2021,
2015.
2
Just
años
for
también
2020
signados
and
por la pandemia,
2021,
se gastaron el
2
récord de
years marked by the
4
pandemic as
billones de
well.
dólares.
A record of $4
Hoy la
billion
invasión
was
a Ucrania
spent.
puede funcionar como una
Today, the
justificación
invasion
para
of
que países
Ukraine
sin
can act as
armamento
a
nuclear
justification
deseen
for
procurarlo.
countries without nuclear
Las preguntas
weapons to
incómodas que
try and
debemos
acquire them.
hacernos durante estas
The
semanas de
uncomfortable
trabajo
questions we
son
should
si
ask
estamos en los
ourselves during these
arbores
weeks of work
de un nuevo ciclo
are
de carrera
whether
armamentística,
we are at the dawn of a
de
new cycle
proliferación
of an
de
arms
armas
race,
nucleares,
of the
y que
proliferation
se
of
está por
nuclear
pasar
weapons,
de la
or
tentación al impulso.
if we are about to move from
Señor presidente,
temptation
vengo
to
de un país
impulse.
del sur, de Sudamérica, de América Latina y el
President, we
Caribe,
come from a
una
country of the
región que logró
South, of
superar
South
sus
America,
hipótesis de
Latin America, and the
conflicto
Caribbean.
entre
This region
vecinos
was
cuando
able to
una nación era
overcome
considerada
its
enemiga de
notions
otra
of conflict
y
between
consiguió
neighbors
establecer una zona de paz que
when
lleva décadas.
nations considered
Con la
themselves
determinación
potential
y la vocación que
enemies,
nos caracteriza,
and
venimos a
was
esta
able to
conferencia para
establish
construir
a zone of
consensos
peace,
que
which
nos
has been
permitan
peaceful for
fortalecer la
decades.
arquitectura global
With the
de la
determination
no
and
proliferación
vocation
nuclear, cuya
that
piedra angular es
characterizes
este
us, we've come to this conference
TNP.
to build consensus, making it
Por eso el
possible to
compromiso de la
strengthen the
Argentina es
global
continuar
architecture of
trabajando en favor de
non-proliferation,
los objetivos
the
y
keystone
propósitos
of which is the NPT.
fundamentales del tratado y en pos del cumplimiento
Argentina's
efectivo y
commitment
equilibrado de
is
sus
therefore
tres
to
pilares,
continue
el
working
desarme,
for the
la no
objectives and
proliferación
foundational
y los usos
purposes of
pacíficos
the
de la energía
treaty,
nuclear.
for
La Argentina
the
cree
effective,
en la necesidad de un mayor
balanced compliance with
compromiso por
three
parte de los
pillars:
estados
disarmament,
poseedores de armas nucleares
non-proliferation, and the
a fin
peaceful
de
use of
avanzar en
nuclear
medidas
energy.
concretas hacia el desarme
Argentina
nuclear,
believes in the
comprometiéndose
need
con nosotros,
of
los
greater
estados
commitment
no
by
poseedores.
nuclear weapons
Por ello, como integrante
holding
de la iniciativa de
states
Estocolmo,
to
la
make
Argentina
progress in
reafirma su
specific
tradicional
measures
apoyo
towards
a
nuclear
los distintos
disarmament,
planes para
committing
avanzar hacia el
themselves
desarme
to us,
nuclear
the
completo, de un modo
non-nuclear states.
verificable, transparente e irreversible.
As a member of the
La
Stockholm
implementación efectiva
Initiative,
del TNP
Argentina thus
requiere
reaffirms
además
its
de la entrada en
traditional
vigor del
support
tratado para
to the various plans
la
to
prohibición
progress towards
completa de ensayos
complete
nucleares. Y
nuclear
también se
disarmament
hace
in a
necesario
verifiable,
negociar un
transparent,
tratado
and
que prohíba la
irreversible
producción de
fashion.
material
The
fisionable y
effective
reduzca el riesgo nuclear.
implementation of the NPT also
Señor
requires the
presidente,
entry into force
hasta
of the
tanto las armas
Comprehensive
nucleares se hayan
Nuclear Test
eliminado de
Ban
manera
Treaty,
completa,
and
transparente y
also to
irreversible, los
negotiate a
estados
treaty which
no
prohibits
poseedores debemos
the
tener la
production of
garantía
fissile
de que no
material
seremos
and
susceptibles
reduces nuclear risk.
de la amenaza o el uso
President,
del armamento nuclear.
Until nuclear weapons are completely
No quisiera dejar de
eliminated
resaltar
in
que
a
la
transparent and irreversible
manera
fashion,
que la mera existencia
non-nuclear
de
states
estas
must have
armas
the guarantee
supone un riesgo
that we are
sistemático
not subject to
de
threat
como se puso de
or the
manifiesto
use of
en
nuclear
diferentes
weapons.
acontecimientos
I do
derivados de
not
la
wish
invasión
to
de
fail
Rusia
to stress
sobre
the very
Ucrania.
existence
Una medida
of these
concreta
weapons is a
es avanzar en el
systematic risk,
retiro de las
as was
declaraciones
shown in
interpretativas
different
a los
events
protocolos de los acuerdos de las zonas
after the
de libres de armas nucleares. Mi país continuamente reclama por esta medida y le atribuye el mayor de los esfuerzos al marco del OPANAL. Para la Argentina ello es particularmente importante a la luz de la prolongada e injustificada presencia militar del Reino Unido en el Atlántico Sur, complemento de la usurpación de tierras y mares circundantes de nuestro país, lo que incluye el desplazamiento de submarinos con capacidad de portar armamento nuclear en esta zona desnuclearizada. Recientemente tomó Estado Público documentos desclasificados en los archivos nacionales de Londres que prueban que durante el conflicto del Atlántico Sur de 1982 el Reino Unido envió a la región buques equipados con 31 armas nucleares, lo que representaba en ese entonces el 65% de su stock de bombas nucleares de profundidad. Además de tratarse de una significativa cantidad, la mera presencia de esas armas implicó no solo para la Argentina, sino para toda la región un grave riesgo nuclear, tanto en términos de contaminación radioactiva en el Atlántico Sur, como por las catastróficas consecuencias humanitarias asociadas al armamento nuclear. Esta información que Argentina subrayó en distintas oportunidades ya ha tomado estado público, casi 40 años después de que tuvieran lugar los hechos, periodo durante el cual el Reino Unido negó categóricamente poseer armas nucleares en la zona del conflicto del Atlántico Sur. Esa conducta es violatoria de la obligación de obrar de buena fe y demuestra la falta de garantía de transparencia acerca de la presencia de armas nucleares en el Atlántico Sur. Preservar el Tratado de Tlatelolco, implementar de manera cabal sus provisiones, significa preservar también la primera zona libre de armas nucleares en una zona densamente poblada como es la región de América Latina y el Caribe. Lo señalo en nombre de mi país y también porque la Argentina ejerce en este momento por designación unánime de sus miembros la presidencia pro tempore de la Comunidad de Estados Latinoamericanos y Caribeños. Señor Presidente, en el marco de las crecientes tensiones regionales que se observan, quisiera recordar que la Argentina ha expresado de manera permanente su enérgico repudio a los lanzamientos misilísticos y los ensayos nucleares efectuados por Corea del Norte. Urgimos a Corea del Norte a abandonar su programa nuclear y otros programas de armas de destrucción masiva y a volver al pleno cumplimiento de sus compromisos. Reiteramos una vez más nuestro apoyo al Plan de Acción Integral Conjunto en Irán y al papel crucial que desempeña el Organismo Internacional de Energía Atómica, justamente a cargo de un diplomático argentino, Rafael Grossi, en materia de vigilancia y verificación. Llamamos a las partes del acuerdo a que vuelvan un pleno cumplimiento a fin de fortalecer al régimen de no proliferación y a la seguridad internacional. Mi país mantiene un compromiso ineludible con la no proliferación y el sistema de salvaguardias de la OIEA. Sus labores son cruciales en la promoción de los usos pacíficos de la tecnología y la energía nuclear. Es esencial continuar apoyando el organismo y su centralidad en lo que atañe a los compromisos establecidos en el artículo 3 del TNP. Señor Presidente, el compromiso de la Argentina con la no proliferación se evidencia también a través de la Agencia Brasileña Argentina de Contabilidad y Control de Materiales Nucleares, la ABAC, parte de una política de Estado que convalidan todas las fuerzas políticas de mi país desde que en 1985 las democracias argentinas y brasileñas firmaron su primer acuerdo de construcción de confianza mutua. La ABAC brinda a la comunidad internacional garantías inequívocas de la naturaleza exclusivamente pacífica de nuestros programas nucleares. En el 2021 se marcó el 30º aniversario de la agencia. Hemos compartido los resultados de estas experiencias porque estamos seguros que puede servir de inspiración para otras regiones del mundo, tal como fuera reconocida en la adopción por consenso de la resolución 76/52 de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. Señor Presidente, frente a un contexto global complejo, la voluntad y el diálogo son las mejores herramientas con las que contamos para avanzar en la construcción de un mundo más previsible y seguro. Base imprescindible para edificar sociedades más justas en un planeta que debe ser más equilibrado. A 50 años de la entrada en vigor del tratado con testimonio de avances y retrocesos, ¿es este un instrumento válido en la actualidad? ¿Aún tiene el vigor y la fuerza suficiente? Confiamos en que esta conferencia constituye una instancia clave para revalidar el rol vital del TNP y renovamos nuestro compromiso, el de nuestro país, con los derechos y obligaciones en materia de desarme, no proliferación y uso pacífico de la tecnología nuclear. La seguridad internacional en el sistema de Naciones Unidas es una condición que ningún país puede alcanzar en solitario, sino mediante la cooperación y el respeto integral a la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Es necesario que las 5 potencias nucleares con asiento permanente en el Consejo de Seguridad se manifiesten individual y colectivamente reafirmando estos compromisos. Los compromisos del tratado. Se deben accionar las medidas de desescalamiento nuclear en torno al caso de Ucrania, multiplicando los sistemas de verificación. Tenemos que proponer una zona de desnuclearización en Europa que contemple a los países sin armas nucleares. Desafíos y temas para el debate de esta semana. Nuestros pueblos quieren paz para superar la postergación, la desigualdad y la injusticia. Pasemos, por favor, de las palabras a los hechos.
Agradezco al ministro de Relaciones Exteriores, Comercio Internacional y Culto de la República Argentina por su discurso y por las palabras dirigidas a la presidencia.
I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Abul Kalam Abdul Momen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, to take the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, we congratulate you for your election as President, and we assure you that my delegation will support you all the way. Bangladesh aligns itself with the statement of non-aligned movement to be delivered by the Republic of Azerbaijan today. Mr. President, Bangladesh acceded to the NPT on 27 September 1979. We remain committed to the full implementation of all its aspects. This commitment emanates from our constitutional obligation. The father of our nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in a historic maiden speech at the UN General Assembly in 1974, made a clarion call to emancipate the world from scars of nuclear war. That forms the cornerstone of Bangladesh's total and unwavering commitment to general and complete disarmament of nuclear weapons. Born out of horrors of the Second World War, the UN envisioned a world free of nuclear weapons in its very first resolution. 76 years has since passed, yet nuclear weapons pose the greatest threat to mankind. The advancement of artificial intelligence, emerging technologies, and cyber operation has made it even more dangerous. In the current geopolitical situation of the globe, leading to a new Cold War, we are afraid the risks of usage of nuclear arsenals no longer remains a distant one. Mr. President, we firmly believe that the ultimate guarantee of international peace and security lies in the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Allow me to highlight some specific thoughts in this regard. First, the international community must recognize the dehumanizing and devastating consequences of nuclear weapons. This is imperative that the international community unite against the perpetual holding of nuclear weapons by a handful of states in total disregard of the safety and security of humanity. Towards that end, we urge nuclear weapon states to fulfill in good faith their long overdue legal obligations under Article 6 of the NPT and also comply with their undertakings in line with the 13 practical steps under the 2010 Action Plan on Disarmament and Nuclear Weapons, and in particular, Action 5 to accomplish the total elimination of their nuclear weapons. Second, as I mentioned already, to demonstrate our unflinching commitment to total elimination of nuclear weapons, we are among the first few countries to ratify the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We welcome the coming into force of the treaty on 22nd January 2021 and the first meeting of the states parties of TPNW in June 2022 and its landmark 50-point Vienna Action Plan. We believe TPNW will serve as a critical component in strengthening the NPT. We call upon all states that are yet to join TPNW to do so without any delay to attain universal application of this treaty. We would like to see a matter of priority its full implementation by all, including the nuclear weapon possessing states and nuclear umbrella states. Third, we support the effective implementation of the NPT through its three pillars, namely nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful use of nuclear energy. In this regard, Bangladesh emphasizes the non-discriminatory implementation of Article 4 of the treaty, which recognizes the inalienable rights of all states to develop, research, produce, and use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, including in power generation, healthcare, and agriculture. We call for increased investment and international cooperation in the research of nuclear technology and explore the potential of its peaceful use for the benefit of humankind. Fourth, pending the total elimination of nuclear weapons, we call upon nuclear weapon states to extend to the non-nuclear weapon states effective, universal, unconditional, and non-discriminatory assurances against the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons under all circumstances as a matter of top priority. Fifth, we stress the need to scale up our efforts for the rapid entry into force of the CTBT and commencing negotiation on fissile materials cut-off treaty indeed. Indeed, we remain deeply frustrated with the long-standing stalemate in this regard in the Conference of Disarmament in Geneva. We also reaffirm the critical importance of nuclear weapon-free zones for the NPT regime. Sixth, the pandemic has reinforced our belief that weapons do not save lives. Yet, in 2020, last year, $82.4 billion were spent to upkeep nuclear weapons, even amid a pandemic. Sadly, that could otherwise be better used to protect our planet and the people. We urge the states to stop senseless investments in destructive nuclear weapons and instead redirect these resources to promote health, address climate change, achieve the SDGs, and promote peace and stability across nations. Finally, Mr. President, can I hope that the 10th NPT Review Conference would produce an outcome that would facilitate the universality and implementation of the treaty to make the world free from the threat of nuclear weapons. This is imperative for us in order to assure a better and safer world for our future generations. Let me hope and dream that one day the world will be free of nuclear weapons. I thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh for his statement and for the kind words addressed to the Presidency. I now have the honor to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Affairs and Foreign Trade and in charge of Federal Cultural Institutions of Belgium.
Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi tout d'abord de vous féliciter d'avoir assumé la présidence de la conférence d'examen du TNP et de vous remercier très chaleureusement de la préparation transparente et inclusive. Je vous assure de l'entièreté de la coopération de ma délégation dans l'exercice de vos responsabilités. Sachez que la Belgique s'associe pleinement à la déclaration de l'Union européenne. Monsieur le Président, la guerre non provoquée, injustifiée et contraire au droit international qui a été déclenchée par la Russie contre l'Ukraine nous confronte malheureusement de nouveau à une menace nucléaire. La gravité de cette situation exige de toutes les nations éprises de paix de non seulement condamner l'agression de l'Ukraine par la Russie et d'exiger son retrait inconditionnel des frontières ukrainiennes internationalement reconnues. La Belgique condamne également tout discours impliquant une coercition nucléaire et toute action mettant en danger la sécurité et la sûreté nucléaire de l'Ukraine. Lorsqu'on examine la détérioration des relations entre les puissances mondiales et l'augmentation de l'importance des armes nucléaires dans le discours public, le défi formidable auquel est confrontée cette conférence apparaît très clairement. Les grands dossiers de prolifération restent en suspens. Certains traités sur le contrôle des armements se sont effondrés. Les problèmes de mise en œuvre et de vérification ont sapé la confiance dans la durabilité des accords juridiques. De plus, un fossé s'est malheureusement creusé au sein de notre communauté sur la voie du désarmement nucléaire. Le tableau est certes sombre, mais il ne doit cependant pas nous affaiblir dans notre détermination. Nous devons considérer ce qui est en jeu. Le TNP est un rempart contre la prolifération des armes nucléaires. Il offre aux États le bienfait de l'atome, que ce soit pour l'énergie ou pour la thérapie contre le cancer. Il assure la sécurité et le développement technologique. Il est donc de notre responsabilité collective de réaffirmer notre engagement vers l'ordre mondial fondé sur les règles et de tout mettre en œuvre pour le succès de cette conférence. Tous les sujets doivent pouvoir y être abordés sans tabou ni risque de blocage. Nos engagements passés ne sont pas devenus obsolètes. Le plan d'action 2010 offre toujours une base très solide pour progresser dans les trois piliers du TNP. Nous devons maintenant discuter de sa mise en œuvre et convenir des mesures concrètes pour réaliser ces objectifs. La Belgique est très préoccupée par l'expansion alarmante du programme nucléaire iranien.
Gravely concerned by the alarming expansion of Iran's nuclear program, both in terms of fissile material and know-how. Iran should return to compliance with its international obligations and allow the IAEA to carry out its verification activities without hindrance. The Iranian file shows the importance of the additional protocol. It is our guarantee for effective control of the nuclear program beyond any JCPOA expiry date.
Dépasse d'ailleurs le cas de l'Iran.
And this observation extends beyond the case of Iran. There needs to be a renewed push for the universalization of the additional protocol because experience has shown that a safeguards agreement alone is not enough to detect secret programs. North Korea continues to flout international rules. Appeasement is not an option. International pressure on the regime must be maintained, including through strict application of sanctions by all states without exception.
Monsieur le Président, Nous ne pouvons pas nous satisfaire du rythme actuel du désarmement nucléaire. Les États dotés d'armes nucléaires doivent prendre des mesures supplémentaires. Aucun membre du TNP n'est exempté des obligations au titre de l'article 6. Nous regrettons que la Chine soit le seul État doté d'armes nucléaires qui augmente rapidement son stock nucléaire. D'autres États modernisent leurs arsenaux et introduisent de nouveaux vecteurs potentiellement déstabilisants.
Destabilizing delivery systems.
Actual
stockpile reductions of all types of nuclear weapons should be coupled with policy steps to reduce the risk of accidental or unauthorized attacks.
La Belgique soutient le document de travail de l'initiative de Stockholm sur la réduction des risques nucléaires. Cependant, si la réduction des risques répond à un besoin existentiel, elle ne peut pas se substituer au progrès tangible en matière de désarmement. Le désarmement sans contrôle conduit inévitablement au désarmement sans confiance. La vérification du désarmement nucléaire nécessite
Nuclear disarmament verification requires the establishment of new techniques and procedures. Several initiatives are dedicated to this, and Belgium has actively contributed to the efforts of one of them, namely the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification, which met in Brussels last June.
Un monde sans armes nucléaires n'est possible que dans un monde sans essais nucléaires. La Belgique, avec 16 autres États, a présenté un document de travail proposant des mesures que tous les États peuvent mettre en œuvre pour renforcer le traité d'interdiction complète des essais nucléaires et son régime de vérification, et avancer ainsi vers son entrée en vigueur. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de terminer par un appel. Nous appelons en particulier chaque État de l'annexe 2 à accéder au traité sans attendre que les autres le fassent au préalable. Ainsi, chaque signature sera un pas supplémentaire vers un monde dénucléarisé et en paix. Et c'est là notre vœu à tous. Faisons en sorte qu'il se réalise.
Our common wish, let us make sure that it becomes a reality. Thank you.
I would like to thank Her Excellency Hatja Laviv, Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Affairs, Foreign Trade, and in charge of Federal Cultural Institutions of Belgium, for her statement and for the kind words addressed to the Presidency. And now I have the honor to invite His Excellency Philip Twitford, Minister of Disarmament and Arms Controls of New Zealand, to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I extend my warm congratulations to you, Mr. President, and assure you of the full cooperation of the New Zealand delegation. I'll get right to it. In spite of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the nuclear disarmament obligation enshrined in Article 6, we seem as far as ever from a world without nuclear weapons, and in real danger of moving backwards. The decades-long trend of stockpile reductions is on the verge of reversal. All nuclear weapons states have modernisation programs underway, with billions of dollars invested in plans for the long-term possession of nuclear weapons. The military doctrines of these states and their alliance partners continue to reflect an undiminished reliance on nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, experts tell us that the risk of nuclear weapon use has increased dramatically, and so too have dangerous rhetoric and exercises threatening such use. We've seen this most recently from Russia in the lead up to and following its illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, an invasion which has shattered the value of negative security assurances. New Zealand condemns Russia's actions in the strongest possible terms. Mr. President, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has made clear New Zealand's strong view that the legacy of Russia's invasion of Ukraine must not be an arms race and a more polarised and dangerous world. What is needed is an equal commitment to international institutions, multilateralism and disarmament. But rather than realising the security dividends history has proven can accrue from nuclear arms control and disarmament measures, such as those agreed by Khrushchev and Kennedy, Reagan and Gorbachev, the nuclear weapon states and many of their allies are doubling down on nuclear deterrence. This puts at risk not just the disarmament pillar of the NPT, but the non-proliferation pillar as well. After all, if the most powerful militaries in the world need nuclear weapons to feel safe, why shouldn't everyone else have them too? Now, that's of course not an argument that New Zealand can subscribe to, not just because of our legal obligations under both the NPT and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, but because of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. More nuclear weapons, whether in the hands of the existing nuclear weapon states or others, will not make us safer. New Zealand remains steadfast in our opposition to the DPRK's unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile programs. We're deeply concerned about outstanding questions regarding Iran's nuclear program and regret that the JCPOA has yet to be restored. New Zealand wants this review conference to strengthen non-proliferation, to promote nuclear safety and security, and facilitate the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. But I make no apology that our primary concern is the pursuit of a credible outcome on disarmament. For too many years, the statements by nuclear weapon states in support of nuclear disarmament have not been matched by action. And the growing gap between promise and delivery is putting unsustainable pressure on this treaty. We've agreed at previous review conferences to break the goal of disarmament down into smaller, supposedly more achievable steps, such as the entry into force of the CTBT or the negotiation of a fissile material treaty. But even these have not been implemented. Instead, progress is reported on internal P5 discussions, disarmament verification processes, and languishing initiatives in the Conference on Disarmament. But where it really matters, on significant stockpile reductions and efforts to reduce the reliance on nuclear weapons, there hasn't been much progress to report at all in the last 20 years. And almost without exception, the justification for this by the nuclear weapon states has been that the global security environment is not conducive to nuclear disarmament. The logic of the nuclear weapon states is that insecurity and instability somehow render us incapable of doing the very thing that would make the world less insecure and less unstable. In today's deteriorating security climate, this approach is untenable. Mr. President, we must reach agreement here that restores confidence in the intention of the nuclear weapon states to fulfil their disarmament obligations and commitments, and which puts us clearly and irreversibly on a path to doing so. Progress on disarmament cannot be deferred any longer, whatever other challenges we are facing nationally, regionally, or as an international community. And while our national voices will reflect diverse positions on these challenges, our collective voice at the end of the conference must demonstrate consensus on the importance of the NPT and our unwavering commitment to its full implementation.
I thank Minister of Disarmament and Arms Control of New Zealand for his statement and his kind words to the Presidency. And now I have the honor to invite Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany, to take the floor.
Mr. President, colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. For more than 5 months, Russia's war of aggression has caused death and destruction in Ukraine. This war marks a turning point. A permanent member of the UN Security Council is blatantly breaching the UN Charter and trying to subdue its smaller neighbor. In attacking a country that gave up nuclear weapons, Russia is brutally violating the assurances it gave in the Budapest Memorandum. And since the 24th of February, Russia has repeatedly used reckless nuclear rhetoric that is putting at risk everything the NPT has achieved in 5 decades. I welcome the fact that a great majority of states have condemned Russia's aggression and its nuclear signaling. That's what we did here in this room at the UN General Assembly in March, when 141 states condemned Russia's war, as well as its decision to increase the readiness of its nuclear force. Reaffirming this condemnation remains a matter of credibility for all of those promoting serious efforts towards nuclear disarmament. Today, these efforts and the Non-Proliferation Treaty are facing an uncertain future. When I announced my trip to New York to attend this conference, I was asked by many, "What are you doing there? What's the use of flying the flag for nuclear disarmament in times like these? Why are we here?" I think the answer is as simple as this. We are here to defend the rules-based international order. The NPT is not just a piece of paper. It embodies some of the most fundamental commitments of humankind: to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to ensure nuclear weapons are never used again, and to work towards our common goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. As we meet for this conference, we are standing at a crossroads. Due to the pandemic, the 10th NPT review conference has already been delayed by 2 years. The previous review conference was back in 2015. If we take down the flag of nuclear disarmament today, the NPT and all it stands for would be dead. So we are flying this flag not because it's easy, but because it's needed. Much is at stake, as many of you have said already. Much is at stake for us, but even more for future generations. I'm not naive. We will not overcome all obstacles at one single conference. But we can stand our ground and uphold the principles enshrined in the NPT. That is our urgent task. It was an 82-year-old man who drove this message home to me last month. I met him in Nagasaki. He is a survivor of the catastrophic atomic blast of August
1945. He told me about the glaring light of the explosion, about his family members and friends dying, about further family members and friends dying afterwards, years by years, because of cancer. His experience stands for the horror of hundreds of thousands, and I include many victims of nuclear testing in the decades afterwards. This man said to me, "Make sure humans must never again be hurt by nuclear weapons. And if we can move just an inch closer to that goal here in New York during the next weeks, that will be worth every effort." And that is why we are here this month, to uphold our belief in an international peaceful order. With this in mind, I see 4 priorities for us as we seek to advance the NPT's agenda. First, it's crucial to reaffirm the validity of NPT's acquis and to implement our commitment. This is a matter of credibility and remains the basis for universal support of the NPT. Faced with Russia's attacks on the rules-based order, it is now even more important to uphold agreed norms and principles and to call out violations. Now is the time to stand strong. Second, we have to reduce the risk of nuclear escalation and put ourselves back on the track of nuclear disarmament. With our partners in the Stockholm Initiative and in the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative, we have proposed many steps that could be taken now or in short term. Transparency on arsenals and restraints in doctrines. Crisis-proof communications to prevent escalation. And renewed dialogue on next-generation arms control agreements and future reductions. I'm convinced if we really try, progress can be achieved. But, and this is also the brutal reality, it can be achieved only if all nuclear weapon states take credible steps. Today, Russia is doing the opposite. China's arsenals are growing. In this context, I welcome the readiness of the United States announced today to negotiate a new arms control framework to replace New START. In such times, honest dialogue is therefore essential, also to move forward on non-proliferation. And this is my third point. The IAEA safeguard system is the greatest achievement under the NPT, so we must strengthen it. Moreover, proliferation crises demand our fullest resolve. The continued expansion of the Iranian nuclear program is of great concern to us. Iran has no justification for many of its nuclear activities. For example, no non-nuclear weapon state needs uranium enriched to 60%. And recent comments from Tehran are deeply disturbing. I therefore urgently call on Iran, as many colleagues have said before, to accept the package aimed at restoring JCPOA. A fair deal is